Hey, welcome to Module 3 in Screencast. It's Patrick. And one question from each of the first three chapters. I got a couple. What's inquiry-based education? That can be defined as an inquiry process that resolves questions, curiosities, doubts, and uncertainties about complex phenomena in, my emphasis added, real life. Student inquiry is very much an integral part of PBL and problem resolution. 10 reasons for using problem-based learning. Well, processing information at higher levels, such as problem solving, critical thinking, inquiry strategies, reflection, leads to deeper understanding, self-direction, and enhanced retention. I'm just citing the ones that had evidence behind them, and I'm going to jump through a few. Several intellectual and pedagogical processes normally involved in PBL, including comparing, contrasting, summarizing non-linguistic representations, cooperative learning, generating testing hypotheses, and questioning, have been positively shown to affect student achievement. I'm going to jump in here and say that we do project-based learning at Summit Public Schools, and we have these cognitive skills that students are graded on. And tweaking with the presentation here, we have compare contrast is one of the cog skills students have to work on, and generating testing hypotheses and generating research questions are also things that we do. Not quite problem-based learning, but project-based learning, which we're going to get to later. The world of work requires the very intellectual skills fostered by PBL: problem solving, decision making, creative thinking, visualizing, critical reasoning, and knowledge how to learn, etc. And I'm interested in this that shows Mello was demonstrating that in certain PBL classrooms, one study found an increased use of hypothesis-driven reasoning, and greater coherence in students' explanations. So that's pretty exciting. Chapter 2, why does Burrell believe that risk is one of the most difficult aspects of problem-based learning? Do you agree? Burrell believes that risk is one of the most difficult aspects of problem-based learning because he claims PBL requires that we feel comfortable taking risks. And people will not ask questions or challenge another point of view unless they feel that the assurance is that questions will be well received and feel that everyone is in this together. So, of course, he claims we're trying to create a classroom where trust, open communication, and willingness to take risks prevail. So, yeah, definitely agree. To approach this from another angle, if we think to financial theory, of course, the potential rewards of a financial instrument are commensurate with the risks. And the reduction of risk calls for a diminishing of potential rewards, as well as the opposite. The pursuit of greater reward leads to taking on greater risk. Well, in this public health crisis and financial crisis we're in right now, you can see this obvious financial theory. The U.S. federal treasury bond is considered to be the most baseline risk-free reward against which all other investment vehicles are compared, because it's backed up by the full faith and credit of the U.S. government, which we'll see in the 21st century how the U.S. government is able to withstand climate chaos and all the financial chaos ahead. But we'll see. As of now, it's been rock solid. In light of the recent global collapse from COVID-19 crisis, a one-year T-note is guaranteeing right now a 0.08 percent return. Ouch. And even the 10-year T-note is selling or trading today for only a paltry 0.85%. Yikes. These sums would likely be swamped by inflation and outcompeted by any and every investment possible in a more normal investment time frame. But considering the panic contagion gripping global financial markets, such tiny returns must be expected during a flight to quality. So what does this intro to finance lesson have to do with teaching PBL? Well, we can also view our efforts with students in light of this elementary finance theory. If we take no risks, the risk-free teaching, do what we've always done, resort to direct instruction with the sage on the stage, then we can expect little, if any, gains to be made by our students relative to other strategies. On the other hand, if we seek to help our students maximize their learning potential in the education market, the classroom, relative to other strategies, that we need to move ahead, and the world is moving ahead with or without them, then we can't be afraid to take risks. Of course, this doesn't mean we should invest our precious time, energy, and efforts carelessly, but on the other hand, we can't be afraid to try new strategies. To the extent that we fail, we must not be afraid to use this experience to inform the inquiry learning teaching cycle. So one of the Facebook engineers and team's mottos is fail faster. So having taught at Summit Prep in Redwood City and my Summit Learning platform being designed by Facebook engineers and dealing with corporate Silicon Valley culture, I distrust a lot of that. because I'm kind of an anarchist and an activist and a cooperative type person. But fail faster makes a lot of sense to me. We got to try as many strategies as possible and see what doesn't work to get feedback and to tweak, find out what works, and use these iterations when subjected to rigorous analysis and feedback that can improve our practice quickly and provide more students with opportunities for learning. From the list on page 12, what do you think are the four most important behavior, beliefs, or skills? Self-direction. So this is the hallmark of Summit Public Schools. And what we're really trying to get with our students to do is to be able to direct their own learning. And I teach a mentor self-directed learning block, and I teach other blocks that are called self-directed learning outside of my regular core content classes. So to be fair, yeah, a lot of teenagers are addicted to their telephones and video games and are procrastinating and so on. But there with the program, they do end up getting it. They have learned how to access content, how to take notes, watch videos, do whatever they need to do to get there. And right now, school's open and we're teaching. We're doing virtual school. And my students have laptops and they have cameras and they have Zoom and they have Google Hangouts, mostly where we meet. And they're submitting work online. And they're doing self-directed learning. Cooperation, of course, all 21st century knowledge generation is collaborative and cooperative. Curiosity, there has to be natural curiosity to drive student engagement and to make authentic curriculum choices centered around students' curiosity. That's what compels students to engage with and persist with complex and rigorous problems and curriculum. Persistence, the ability to stick with something. Well, that's a big one. We really need to develop that. And there's so much I could be doing here to make these little adjustments. What can teachers do to ensure that students with special needs are included in the instruction? Well, this is a big one, and especially now it's a big crisis in public education now that we're doing remote learning, now that we're doing virtual school. I get the feeling the federal government and the state government are basically granting short-term waivers. It's not clear how that's going to go down with IEPs, and I know that my students have a virtual learning center where they're getting one-on-ones with their special ed teachers. But basically, Burrell suggests giving students free reign over a few well-selected topics. To be honest, it seems like his work was really thin here, sparse at best. In general, it takes considerable thought and effort to create appropriate accommodations and supports for curriculum that's applied in the specific. Burrell doesn't mention that. It's kind of obvious. So this is tricky. This is kind of like the meat and potatoes, the brown rice and tofu of what we do. Devil or the angels in the details. What does he mean when he says curriculum is boundaryless? Well, he uses the term to describe how students can engage with content at varied points of interest and respond in ways of their own choosing, thus tearing down some of the traditional boundaries of how students learn in a traditional classroom. And he argues that SPED and 504 students can engage with curriculum in many ways, which might reflect multiple intelligences. He mentions Jack Welch, of course, General Electric CEO, in the first chapter to frame that. So what's meant by problem-based learning? That's the practice of curriculum and instruction that encourages students to embark on an inquiry process to identify their own problems, to solve, and questions to answer, work to answer these problems and resolve these problems and present their own findings. Teachers facilitate learning rather than directing instruction. And so there's a lot here from Emello, Silver, and Everbach, Learning Theories and Problem-Based Learning. And I'm not going to get into everything that they said, but there's a lot. Pretty similar. John Spencer had an awesome video, What's PBL in 5 minutes or less? And he talks about the need for it. And of course, we're going from industrialization of one size fits all into 21st century. And kids need to dream, wonder, imagine, and think critically. And instead of the corporate ladder, we see it's a maze now. And it's very difficult. So students need and deserve a new way to go to school. We see that this began at Case Western in the 50s, where its practicality and its success has led to widespread diffusion organically in professional education. So now it's time to bring it down systematically into secondary education. PBL's connection to the social family of education, we can see it's connected to John Dewey, woohoo, and Paulo Freire? Yeah. So we present or identify the problem, develop a plan to address the problem using a collaborative work, research, and ideation process, implement a plan, and evaluate the implementation. And then we analyze results, reflect, etc. So how is this problem-based learning different from project-based learning? Not the same. Again, according to John Spencer, in problem-based learning, you don't have to design a product. And students are always guided to some kind of predetermined product outcome with project-based learning. Also, PBL is not the same because ideally it addresses real-world problems that actually exist in the real world, whereas project-based learning is often contrived by teachers in order to simulate some kind of real-world process. In essence, students are free to pursue open-ended inquiry wherever it may lead, and they're also free to present their findings in whatever format they find to be most useful and relevant. So John Larmer in project-based learning versus problem-based learning versus XPL summarizes these differences in this graph. The image credit goes to John Larmer, and that basically summarizes what I was talking about. And problem-based learning is more often single subject, tends to be shorter. It follows a classic traditionally prescribed series of steps. The product can be tangible or a proposed solution. It's often expressed in writing or presentation. And students often use case studies or fictitious scenarios, as well as ill-structured problems. Boom, there's Larmer's analysis. The steps go like this. Presentation of the ill-structured, open-ended, messy problem. Problem definition or formulation, the problem statement. Tricky. That's really the trick, as we're going to learn from design thinking. Generation of a knowledge inventory, what we know about the problem, what we need to know. Generation of possible solutions. Formulation of learning issues for self-directed and coached learning. Woohoo! Sharing of finding solutions. 4, identify how teachers can infuse student inquiry into their curriculum and turn students' questions into instructional units. Easier said than done. Kind of concerned about this one. Thought this would be a slam dunk, but yeah, it's always harder in real life, right? So basically, I would suggest, I'm assuming you're suggesting, that teachers should be familiar with design thinking and why it's so popular and why it's so important. So Freeze Dam and Xiang Tao write, what's so special about design thinking is that designers' work processes can help us systematically extract, teach, learn, and apply human-centered techniques to solve problems in a creative and innovative way. So before we think about how we can apply it to our curriculum, we want to sort of grok or integrate the design thinking into our process. And they go on to define design thinking as an iterative process in which we seek to understand the user, yes, challenge assumptions, and redefine problems. Design thinking provides a solution-based approach to these problems. So the Hasso-Plattner Institute of Design at Stanford, the D School, says there are 5 phases of design thinking. Empathize with your users. We're all humans. We're not engineers. We're not robots. We're not artificial intelligence. Some of us may be engineers. The majority of people who are going to interact with our technologies and our lessons and our designs, as it were, are going to be humans. And they're going to need empathy. We're going to need to put ourselves in their shoes. We need to figure out what are their needs, what are their problems, and then get insights into their situations to help us create our designs and our lessons. And then we challenge assumptions that we may have had and try to create ideas for innovative solutions. We prototype, test solutions, and so on. And here's that design thinking nonlinear process image. This one comes from the Interaction Design Foundation. But we go from empathizing to defining to ideating to prototyping to testing. Of course, this is not a linear process. It can circle back and around at any point. Don Norman, the godfather, couldn't think of a better word, but godfather, put that in quotes, of design thinking explains designers take the original problem, not as a final statement. They think broadly about the real issues underlying the problem statement, what the real issues underlying the problem statement might be. And so most of important is that this process is expansive and iterative, okay? So yeah, once educators have a grasp on the philosophy of design thinking, they can use different strategies to infuse student inquiry into their curriculum. One way would be to lead design thinking lessons and experiments with their students. So the Stanford Design School has some great tools that were on your website. And so there's the Get Started with Design Thinking, Redesign the School Lunch Experience, the Facilitator's Guide to that Wallet experiment. And to be really clear, there's a lot of feeling, there's a lot of emotion. We want to put ourselves in the shoes of the other person and understand what's driving behavior. So another way would be for educators to take time to reflect and apply the design thinking process directly to their own units and lessons and see what comes up. Or even messier, have teachers turn to their students to apply the design thinking process directly to their own lessons and see what comes up. This definitely would be messy and time consuming, but could be useful. Thanks for listening. See